Even after a year of relentless fighting, more than 100 Israeli hostages remain captive in Gaza, their fate uncertain as the conflict rages on. While families wait in anguish for their loved ones' return, tensions within Israel's leadership are boiling over. Senior IDF officials accuse Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of abandoning the hostage crisis in favor of a more sinister goal: annexing northern Gaza. Netanyahu has used the hostage situation as a pretext to intensify ground operations in Gaza, a move that critics argue puts those same hostages at greater risk.
Our brave soldiers are now in the heart of Jabalia, where they are dismantling the Hamas strongholds. Our 101 hostages who are in Gaza are always in the forefront of our minds. We will do everything to return them, all of them, the living and the dead, home.
In a series of behind-closed-doors meetings, IDF commanders have criticized the recent decision to escalate ground operations in northern Gaza, arguing that it was made with minimal consultation and lacks a clear strategic purpose tied to the hostage crisis. According to these officials, the operation appears aimed at forcing civilians in the area to evacuate, aligning with a broader plan to eventually annex the region rather than focusing on securing the hostages' release. There has been almost no serious discussion of the hostages since negotiations collapsed, said a senior defense official, noting that the government has not engaged with international mediators or the IDF's own intelligence units on the issue. Families of hostages held by Hamas are protesting against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, claiming he is using their plight for political advantage. They argue that his focus on escalating military operations in Gaza jeopardizes efforts to bring their loved ones home. Many are demanding a serious negotiation approach rather than prioritizing territorial goals, stressing that the hostages' lives are at risk.
He is just killing us. He's killing us, he's killing, he makes more war and more war, and it's not anymore to just defend ourselves.
There was a deal on the table, and he could have took it, and he could have released the hostages, and we know that also now there is a deal on the table. It could be possible, and the only thing that is making it not happen is Netanyahu's personal interest and his beliefs.
Meanwhile, the IDF continues to warn that ground operations are significantly increasing the risk to the hostages' lives. 6 hostages were recently killed during Israeli advances into Gaza, and Hamas has now instructed its fighters to execute captives if Israeli forces get too close. Despite the deteriorating situation for the hostages, the Netanyahu government appears intent on pressing ahead with its Gaza strategy. Defense officials report that political leaders are prioritizing controversial plans, such as Major General Rita Giora Island's surrender or starve strategy, which would force the evacuation of northern Gaza residents to the south. Those who remain would be classified as Hamas operatives and treated as legitimate military targets. This plan has drawn significant criticism from within the IDF and among Israel's international allies, many of whom warn it could violate international law. The divide between the military and the government has widened as the IDF continues to press for more focus on hostage recovery. Senior commanders argue that the political leadership is pursuing long-term territorial goals at the expense of addressing the urgent needs of the hostage situation. Some in the defense establishment believe that the government's push for annexation could undermine Israel's overall military campaign damage international support, and worsen the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. As IDF operations in Gaza intensify, the standoff between Israel's military and political leaders shows no signs of easing. Military officials are growing increasingly vocal in their calls for the government to refocus on the hostages before it's too late.